The countdown to the Federation's destruction was almost over, but just as Sarah reached for the detonator, Jake stopped her. The man who had betrayed her now had a choice to make, one that would change everything. But what happened next will shock you. Let's go back to the beginning. The Federation's reign was an intricate web of control, an almost flawless system that stretched across the galaxy, enfolding entire species under its cold, calculating rule. To the universe, it appeared as an empire of unyielding stability, of peace enforced with ironclad authority. But for Commander Sarah Price, those ideals had always been little more than a facade, a gilded mask hiding the brutality beneath. She had once believed in the Federation's promises: peace, prosperity, a united galaxy. But the deeper she ventured into the heart of its military, the more the cracks began to show, the more the horror beneath its surface became impossible to ignore. Sarah's first mission was a simple one, a reconnaissance operation near a rebel outpost. But it didn't take long for the truth to emerge. The Federation wasn't just seeking control, it was eradicating anything that threatened its vision. Sarah had seen the aftermath of their campaigns. Entire cities burned to ash, cultures eradicated in the name of progress, the cries of millions silenced forever. Entire species were enslaved, forced to work as nothing more than labor for the Federation's colossal war machine, their lives deemed insignificant in the grand scheme of unification. Yet it was the humans, the last group of rebels defying the Federation's grip, that would alter everything for Sarah. She had been raised to believe the human resistance was a rogue faction of terrorists, a group of radicals fighting for a dying cause. But as she spent more time among the Federation's ranks, she realized the rebels were nothing more than the last embers of a dying flame of freedom. And when Sarah uncovered a classified project, a covert operation that planned to exterminate the human resistance once and for all, her world began to unravel. The Federation's true nature was laid bare, no longer simply a force of order, but an unrelenting, genocidal regime bent on total domination. Supreme Leader Klaus Drayton was the embodiment of everything she had come to despise. Cold, calculating, and ruthless, he had engineered the extermination of countless civilizations in his quest for absolute power. To him, the humans were little more than expendable pawns, obstacles to be crushed without a second thought. Sarah had always believed that she was serving a noble cause, but now, as the truth burned through her, it became clear that the Federation was no different than the oppressive regimes she had been trained to fight against. It was a bitter revelation, but a necessary one. One night, as she watched the Federation fleet prepare to wipe out the last human outpost, Sarah made a choice that would forever alter the course of her life. It wasn't a decision made out of anger, though that emotion simmered beneath the surface. It was a decision made out of necessity. The rebellion needed someone who understood the Federation from the inside. She couldn't sit idly by as they carried out another massacre. With a cold resolve, Sarah defected. The rebellion, once a distant concept, was now her cause, her mission. The Federation had pushed her to the edge, but in doing so, it had created something far more dangerous: a rebel from within. The first spark of rebellion had been lit, not just in the galaxy, but within Sarah herself. From that moment, there would be no turning back. The path ahead was uncertain, and the stakes were higher than ever, but for the first time in years, Sarah felt something she had lost long ago: hope. The cold, distant stars shimmered through the cracks of the rusty, battered walls of the rebel base. Sarah's breath echoed in the hollow silence of the underground hideout, the weight of her decision settling deeper into her bones with each passing moment. She had been a soldier, a commander who once stood proudly beneath the Federation's banner. Now she was something else entirely: a fugitive, an outcast, and the spark that could either ignite or destroy the last flicker of resistance against the Federation's iron rule. Sarah had expected fear, hostility, distrust. The ragtag survivors who had been fighting for their lives against the Federation would no doubt view her as a threat, an unknown element to be scrutinized, maybe even feared. But what she found in the hidden chambers of the rebel headquarters was different. The walls were lined with maps, hastily scribbled plans, and evidence of years of desperation. The scent of sweat and smoke hung in the air, a reminder of the constant battle they waged in the shadows of the galaxy. And in the center of it all was Captain Jake Matthews, his face as scarred as his heart, a man who had lost everything. Jake had never seen his homeworld again. The Federation had taken it from him, taken his family, his friends, the very fabric of his past. Now, his eyes, hollow with loss, flickered with something new when he saw Sarah. It was a recognition of something both terrifying and familiar. A leader. Not just a leader, but one who had been where he had been, inside the heart of the Federation, its darkest corners, and had survived. Jake had spent years alone, watching the Federation crush his people, helpless to stop it, but always waiting for a chance. A chance for someone to come and lead the charge. Someone who understood the stakes. Someone who knew the power the Federation had and how to defeat it. He had seen that person now. In Sarah, he saw the strength he needed, not just for survival, but for the revolt, the real fight. She wasn't a soldier by their standards anymore. She was a living weapon forged by betrayal and fire. Her knowledge of the Federation was more powerful than any blaster, any fleet. She had the keys to its destruction. Together they formed something that had never existed before, an army, a rebellion. The fights that followed were not about escape anymore. They were about reclaiming something far more elusive, dignity. Humanity, crushed under the Federation's boots, was now rising to meet it, and Sarah was at the heart of it. But it wasn't a simple crusade for freedom. No. As the days turned to weeks, and the weeks to months, the toll of each battle began to wear her down. The faces of the fallen blurred together. The screams of the dying became an endless backdrop to the growing fire of revolution. And in the quiet moments, when the dust of battle settled, Sarah's doubts began to grow louder. Was this about freedom? Or was it something darker, something more personal? Klaus Drayton's cold eyes burned in her mind, a constant reminder of everything she had lost. The comrades, the lives that had been swept away by his endless ambition. Was the rebellion a chance at redemption, or a thirst for revenge? The lines blurred, and with each victory, each hard-fought clash against the Federation's superior forces, the questions only deepened. She had come so far. But what would it all cost in the end? The rebellion was not just a fight against an empire, it was a battle for her soul. The air was thick with the scent of gunpowder, the sound of boots clattering against the dirt, and the harsh whispers of command. Sarah stood at the front of the rebellion's forces, her eyes locked on the Federation stronghold that loomed in the distance like a fortress of despair. Her pulse raced in time with the beats of the war drum that echoed in her chest, and yet, despite the urgency of the moment, there was something else gnawing at her, a dissonance that she couldn't quite shake. It had been a long road to this point. Every battle had been a small victory, every step forward a reminder of what they were fighting for. But as they approached the heart of the Federation's empire, something in the air had changed. Tension stretched tight across the ranks, simmering just beneath the surface, as though the rebellion itself was a powder keg ready to explode. The Federation's soldiers were close, too close. And yet, in that moment, Sarah found her gaze lingering on Jake. Jake Matthews. A man whose eyes had once burned with the same fire that now drove her. A man who had fought beside her through countless battles, his loyalty unquestioned, his resolve as steadfast as any soldier's. Or so she had believed. It started with the smallest thing. A misplaced glance, a quiet word exchanged between him and one of the rebellion's officers. But Sarah wasn't one to ignore the signs. The whispers grew louder, and the doubts that had flickered at the edge of her mind began to take root. She pushed them aside. There was no room for doubt now, not when the final battle was so close. And yet, the feeling remained, a gnawing suspicion that clung to her every thought. It wasn't until the day before the assault that she discovered the truth. Sarah had found him alone, away from the command center, his eyes darting nervously as he met her gaze. It took only a single sentence to shatter everything she had known. "I'm not who you think I am, Sarah." Her blood ran cold. The weight of those words hit her harder than any enemy's weapon ever could. She had known betrayal before. The Federation was built on it after all. But this? This was different. Jake had been the one she trusted, the one she thought she understood, the one who had fought alongside her, shared her burdens, her nightmares, the one who had become her closest ally, her friend. Now, he was the enemy, the very person she had sworn to destroy. The world around her seemed to tilt, everything becoming a blur of motion as Jake spoke. He had been a Federation agent, one of their own. He had infiltrated the rebellion years ago, operating from within, gathering intelligence for the enemy. Sarah's heart clenched in her chest as the full scope of his deception unfolded before her. She felt sick, as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet, leaving only emptiness. But then Jake's voice softened, a painful sincerity in his words. He explained that he had once believed in the Federation's cause, had once fought for their vision of order. But after witnessing the atrocities, after seeing the truth of what the Federation truly was, he had turned. He had defected, not to help the rebellion from within, but to destroy the Federation from the outside. His original mission had been to sabotage the resistance, to tear them apart before they could strike. But somewhere along the way, as he had spent more time with Sarah and the others, something had shifted. The man who had been a pawn for the Federation had become their greatest threat. "I never wanted to hurt you," Jake whispered, his voice shaking. "I wanted to stop them, but I didn't know how. Not until I met you." Her mind reeled. She had trusted him. She had shared her dreams, her hopes, her vulnerabilities. And now she had to decide. Could she forgive him? Could she understand the choice he had made, the man he had become? Or was the betrayal too deep, the wound too raw to heal? The rebellion was teetering on the brink of victory, yet here Sarah stood, caught in the storm of her own emotions. The very person who had once understood her struggle, who had shared her fight, had now become a symbol of everything she had fought against. There was no easy answer, no right or wrong choice. Only a shattered trust, a fractured bond, and a war that refused to leave her with any peace. The rebellion's forces were waiting, the final strike against the Federation within reach. But as Sarah looked at Jake, her heart heavy with the weight of his betrayal, she realized that the true battle had always been within her. Would she destroy him, or would she find a way to forgive him? For the sake of the rebellion, for the sake of the future they both had fought for. The answer, she knew, could determine the fate of everything they had worked for. The sound of blaster fire was deafening, the thud of boots against the steel floors of the Federation's fortress a relentless drumbeat. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, each step a reminder that the end was near. The rebellion's forces had fought their way through the fortress's defenses, each battle grueling, each victory coming at an increasingly heavy cost. Now, as they neared the core of the Federation's most deadly weapon, she knew that this was it. The final moment. The point of no return. The Federation had always been a force of oppression, a looming shadow cast across the galaxy. But Klaus Drayton, ever the strategist, had gone too far. In his desperation to crush the rebellion once and for all, he had unleashed his most terrifying creation, a superweapon capable of annihilating entire star systems in a single catastrophic blast. With it, he intended to wipe out humanity and leave the galaxy in his grip forever. Sarah had seen the destruction it could cause, and she knew that if they failed, if the weapon wasn't stopped, nothing would remain. Not humanity, not the galaxy, nothing. Beside her, Jake was a ghost of the man she had once trusted, his face a mask of determination and regret. Their bond, once unbreakable, had fractured under the weight of betrayal. And yet here they were, fighting together once more, side by side, as if the past didn't exist. In the heat of battle, there was no room for doubt or anger. There was only the fight, only the mission. The rebellion's survival, the future of every living being in the galaxy, depended on the success of this final strike. And they had no time to waste. The corridors of the fortress twisted like a maze, but Sarah and Jake pressed forward, cutting down Federation soldiers with ruthless efficiency. Every blast, every swing of their weapons was a step closer to the heart of the enemy. The walls seemed to close in around them, but they didn't stop. Not now, not when so much was at stake. The tension between them, the unspoken words of betrayal and hurt, simmered beneath the surface, but there was no time to address it. The Federation was closing in. The superweapon's core was almost within reach. Finally, they reached the control room, a massive chamber, its walls lined with glowing panels and humming machinery. At the center stood the superweapon, its heart pulsing with energy, waiting to unleash death on a scale the galaxy had never known. Sarah felt the weight of the decision before her, a decision that would change everything. She glanced at Jake, her breath ragged, her hands trembling. In that moment, she knew what had to be done. There was no escape from this. No victory without sacrifice. The weapon had to be destroyed, and she was the one who would do it. It was the only way to ensure that humanity would have a future. But the price would be high. Sarah stepped forward, activating the controls. The energy reading spiked, the room trembling as the weapon hummed with power. But as she worked, she felt a hand on her shoulder, a familiar, steady presence. "Jake, you can't do this alone," he said, his voice quiet but firm. She turned to him, her eyes filled with unshed tears. She had never expected this moment to come, had never expected to stand here with the man who had betrayed her, facing the end of everything. But here they were, and for all the wounds between them, for all the pain they had caused each other, they were fighting for the same cause. Together, they initiated the countdown. The superweapon's core began to destabilize, the countdown ticking toward oblivion. But as the final seconds ticked down, Sarah realized the cost was more than just the weapon. It was everything. With a final glance at Jake, she pressed the detonator. The energy released in a flash that shook the very foundation of the fortress. She felt the shockwave of destruction ripple through her, her body giving in to the inevitable. As she collapsed, her vision dimming, she saw Jake one last time. He was at the console, his eyes locked on hers, a silent understanding between them. He was going to finish it. He was going to be the one to end this, to make sure the Federation's reign was truly over. With a final desperate motion, Jake detonated the superweapon. The explosion was deafening, the sky above them filled with the light of their victory, but at the cost of everything. Sarah's last breath was one of peace. The Federation had fallen. The galaxy was free. But it was no victory without its cost. As the dust settled, Sarah was gone. Jake stood amidst the wreckage, the weight of what he had done pressing heavily on his shoulders. They had won. but it would never feel like enough. The galaxy would rebuild, but it would do so without Sarah. The Federation was gone. But for the first time in centuries, hope flickered in the hearts of humanity. And for the first time in a long time, the stars seemed a little bit brighter.